Today we're going to be solving quadratic equations using square roots. All right, here are your state standards and your success criteria. All right, to be successful today, you need to be able to find the square roots of a number. You need to be able to solve a quadratic equation using square roots, and you need to be able to approximate solutions of quadratic equations. All right, the key idea today, solutions of x squared equals d. All right, so this is a quadratic equation equal to some number. All right, so it says when d is greater than 0. So when d is positive, you're going to have two real solutions, and it's going to be plus or minus the square root of d. All right, when d equals 0, when this is x squared equals 0, you're going to have one real solution, and x is going to equal 0. When d is less than 0, when d is negative, when this number here is negative, you're going to have no real solution. So that's important as we work through square roots. Solving quadratic equations using square roots. This is example 1. When you look at example 1, you have 3x squared minus 27 equals 0, and it says solve using square roots. All right, the reason we can solve using square roots is because there's no middle term. There's no x term or linear term. So you have a quadratic term and a constant term. So we're going to set this equal, what's already set equal to 0. We're going to solve this by simply solving for the variable x. So if I have 3x squared minus 27 equals 0, I'm going to add 27 to both sides. So I'm going to have 3x squared, negative 27 and plus 27 cancel. 0 plus 27 is 27. And then I'm going to divide by 3. So the first thing I'm doing is trying to isolate my x squared. 27 divided by 3 is 9. All right, remember if this is a positive number, I'm going to have two real solutions. If it's 0, I have 1. And if it's negative, I would have 0 real solutions. So I should have two real solutions. So I know that x squared equals 9. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. And the square root cancels the x squared here. So it leaves me just x. X is going to be plus or minus 3. So you have two answers. X equals 3 and x equals negative 3. If you only put one of those, you're missing one of the solutions. All right, so when this is positive, remember you have two real solutions. Make sure you list both of those. All right, B part is x squared minus 10 equals negative 10. So the first thing I'm going to do, add 10 to both sides, because again, I have no linear term, which means I can solve using square roots. So negative 10 plus 10 is 0. Now, if this is 0, remember I have one solution. Take the square root of both sides. X equals 0, because that's all it can be. So I have one solution when this number is 0. Remember, when it's positive, it's 2. 0, it's one solution. And if it's negative, there's no solutions. All right, so for C part, I need to isolate the x squared first. So I need to first subtract 11 from both sides. So I'm going to have negative 5x squared. This is going to cancel. 16 minus 11 is 5. I'm going to divide both sides by negative 5. And I'm going to have x squared equals negative 1. Now remember, if d is negative, it means there is no real solutions. So there's no real solutions here. So no real solutions for part C. Moving on to example 2, solving a quadratic equation using square roots. A part says x minus 1 quantity squared equals 25. So you can tell that this one is a perfect square and 25 is also a perfect square. So we are going to solve by taking the square root of both sides. So I'm going to have x minus 1 squared equals 25. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So again, the square root takes care of the squared term, and that leaves me with x minus 1 equals, and remember when d is positive, I have two solutions. Don't forget your plus or minus, and the square root of 25 is 5. Now, what does this plus minus mean? That means there are two possible solutions. So I'm going to have x minus 1. I'm saying 1 and writing a 5. Sorry about that. All right, so x minus 1 equals plus 5, and x minus 1 equals negative 5. So I do have to have my two solutions, or I'm going to only have the question half right. You only have one solution. That means you only get half the points. All right, so I'm going to add 1 to get 1 to the other side. That means I'm solving for x, getting x by itself. 5 plus 1 is 6. There's one solution. And then I subtract 1 from both sides. X equals negative 5 plus negative 1 is negative 6. So I do have two solutions. And you can plug those in and check them. It's very easy. So 6 minus 1 is 5. 5 squared is 25. That is correct. Negative 6. Negative 6 minus 1 is negative 7. And that is not correct. So if I go back here and look, x minus 1 equals negative 5. I should have added 1. So I made a mistake. And by checking it, it will help me correct that mistake. So I needed to add 1 to both sides. So I've got x minus 1. If I add 1, that gets rid of it. So negative 5 plus 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 minus 1 is negative 5. Negative 5 times negative 5, or negative 5 squared, is 25. So this answer is negative 4 instead of negative 6. So it does pay to check it. Even the teacher makes mistakes sometimes, as you can see. So it is important to check your answers. All right, let's look at B part. 4 times x minus 3 quantity squared equals 9. Let's divide both sides by 4 to get started. And I'm going to have x minus 3 squared equals 9 over 4. Now, leave it as 9 over 4. 9 is a perfect square. 4 is a perfect square. And we're getting ready to take the square root. So if you have perfect squares here, don't turn that into a decimal. Don't turn that into 2.25 or something. You know, use math, good math practice to solve these. All right, now we're going to take the square root of both sides. I'm going to have x minus 3 equals, and I'm going to have plus or minus. Remember, 9 over 4 is positive. That means I'm going to have two real solutions. So I can look at this as the square root of 9 over the square root of 4. So this is the same thing as the square root of 9 over the square root of 4. Both of those are perfect squares. So I'm going to have plus or minus, square root of 9 is 3, square root of 4 is 2. Now, just like the other equation, we're going to do x minus 3 equals positive 3 halves. And we're going to do x minus 3 equals negative 3 halves. All right, now if I add 3 to both sides, x equals 3 plus 3 halves. 3 halves is 1 1/2. So 3 plus 1 1/2 is 4 1/2. All right, I'm going to add 3 to this side as well. All right, I have x equals, that's going to cancel. I've got negative 3 halves, so negative 1 1/2 basically. So if I have 3 minus 1 1/2, I'm going to be left with 1 1/2 or 1.25. All right, again, very important to plug that in and check it. And I'm going to let you guys do that on your own. Okay, you can take your calculator and do 4 times, plug in 4.1 or 4.5 minus 3. 4 1/2 minus 3 is what? 1.5. Take that and square it, times it by 4, and see if you get 9. Do the same thing with 1 1/2. Plug it in for x and see if this side equals 9 as well. I've already checked it on my end, and I did do these correctly. So just to save a little time, check those on your own. Make sure you get the same answer. All right. right, example 3, approximating solutions. That means we might have to round our answers. So it says solve using square roots. Round the solutions to the nearest hundredth. Remember, the nearest hundredth is 2 decimal places. All right, so I'm going to add 13 to both sides. I'm going to have 4x squared. This cancels. 15 plus 13 is 28. Divide both sides by 4. X squared equals. And I'm going to have 28 divided by 4, which is 7. And I'm going to take the square root of both sides. X equals, all right, since 7 is greater than 0, that means I have 2 solutions. So I'm going to have a plus and a minus square root of 7. So I can type that in my calculator and find out what that is. So I'm going to say square root of 7 is about 2.65. All right, so we're going to do the negative. So we got to do negative square root of 7. So we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to put negative and then square root of, did it get the square root button? Square root of 7. All right, and we're going to get negative, about negative 2.65. All right, so that would be our 2 solutions. All right, I want you to pause the video, do the self-assessment, see if you can answer these questions on your own, and then come back and we'll quickly go through them. The first one says, solve the equation using square roots. Round your solutions to the nearest hundredth. So again, you're going to do the same thing we've been doing. This one says, given the equation ax squared plus c equals 0, describe the values of a and c. So the equation has the following number of solutions. When would it have 2 solutions, 1 solution, and no real solutions? We talked about that early in the video, so that should not be too difficult. All right, hopefully you took time to pause the video and get your answers. If you did, you should have got x equals plus or minus the square root of 11. Type that in your calculator and round to the nearest hundredth. You should have got x is about 3.32 and x is about negative 3.32. For this one, when do you have 2 real solutions? You have 2 real solutions when a and c have opposite signs. You have 1 real solution when a is not 0. Has to be quadratic, so a cannot be 0, and c is 0. It has no real solutions when a and c have the same sign. So if you subtract and then you divide and it has the same sign, then that would create a negative number, which would give you no real solutions.